Today we are looking at squares, cubes, and radicals, and this is the first day. Here is your learning target and success criteria. We are learning the inverse relationship between the exponents and radicals in order to solve problems regarding these expressions. Your success criteria is I can square a number, I can cube a number, I can take the square root of a number, and I can take the cube root of a number. And then finally, I can apply inverse relationship or inverse operations between radicals and exponents. If you are copying your notes through the video, this is a good time to pause and copy down your learning target success criteria on the opening sheet. Here is your warm up for today. You have a two-step equation and you are doing an area analysis. So we have 4 minus 2x is equal to a negative 2. They're asking you to one, identify where the person went wrong, and then to rework the problem. So first, I would just go ahead and solve this equation straight out, and then figure out where they went wrong. And that's how you would complete the warm up. Make sure that you copy the warm up down on your warm up sheet. Again, if you're taking notes from the video, you can go ahead and pause at this time to copy down the warm up. Here's our vocabulary. So our words. Let me go ahead and try to blow this up. Hold on 1 second. So here's a list of words that we are using today. We have squares, square roots, root index, cubes, cube root, and radical. You don't have to copy these down because the next slide is actually the definition. So make sure that you copy down the definitions in your notes. So squares, it says it's a number when you multiply a number to itself or to raise a number to the second power. Here's multiple examples. Remember that the 2, it should be a subscript 2, that represents squared. So we have 4 squared is equal to 16. 9 squared, which is the same thing as saying 9 times 9 is equal to 81. Here's 4 squared expanded. 4 squared is 4 times 4 is equal to 16. And then 16 squared is 16 times 16, and this is equal to 256. Again, pause the video so you can copy this down in your notes. Now we're looking at square roots. So in this case, square root, it says it goes the opposite direction. So their inverse is the inverse of squaring. Square root is a number you can multiply to itself to give you that number. So here's an example. We have 3. If I square 3, it's going to give me 9. So 3 times 3 is 9. And if I take the square root of 9, it'll give me 3. Here's some examples. The square root of 4 is 2 because 2 squared is 4. And then the square root of 9 is 3 because 3 squared is 9. And again, make sure that you copy down this vocabulary word in your notes. Here's another thing that is very important, and I'll bring this up again when we get to simplifying radicals. Please remember that the square root has an index of 2. The definition of root index, it says the index of a number says how many times to use that number in multiplication. So looking at this graph, looking at this picture, we have the radical symbol, which is the check mark here. We have the root index. Remember that a square root, the index will always be 2. Okay. And then we have what's considered the radicand, but we'll discuss that later on in another unit. And so when they took the square root of 81, it gave them 9. Again, make sure you copy this down in your notes. You can pause the video at this time to copy it. All right. So the question is, what is the relationship of squaring and square roots? Square root undo squares. They're inverse operations of each other. Okay. So we talked about inverses when we looked at solving equations, and we're talking about inverses now. And so we're looking at squares and square roots, cubes and cube roots. So x squared, the inverse of squaring it is to take the square root, which is this check mark here. So 3 squared is 9. And then if I take the square root of 9, it'll give me 3. So they undo each other. Here's another vocabulary word. Please make sure you guys copy down the inverse relationship in your notes. Please make sure you copy this down. So remember that square roots undo squares. They're inverses of each other. Now, the next definition we have is cubes. It's when you multiply a number to itself 3 times or you raise a number to the third power. So we have 2 to the third power, which is equivalent to saying 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. And then we have 5 cubed, which is the same thing as saying 5 times 5 times 5, which is 125. Again, make sure you copy this down in your notes. This is another vocabulary word. And then we have cube roots. So cube roots go in the opposite direction. of cubing, their inverse, and cube root is the number you can multiply to itself 3 times to give you that number. So we have several examples. This just make sure you guys know the cube root looks like a square root, except the only difference is the index is 3. Okay. And they show you that they're inverses. So 3 cubed, which is 3 to the third power, is equal to 27. And then the cube root of 27 is 3. And so here are some examples. The cube root of 3, and it will look like this. The cube root of 8, I'm sorry, is 2. And 2 to the third power is equal to 8. And they're just showing you how they inverses. The cube root of 125 is 5. Okay, and this is a typo. This should say 5 to the third power, not to the second. So this should say to the third power is equal to 125. And I'll go ahead and change this right now. This should be a 3. Okay, so 5 to the third power is 125. And please make sure that you copy this down in your notes. What is the relationship of cubing and cube roots? Guys, again, these are inverses. So x to the third power is one operation, and the inverse of that is the cube root. Okay, so 2 to the third power is 8, and if I take the cube root of 8, it'll equal to 2. So again, they undo each other. And then finally, the last, make sure you copy this down in your notes, guys. Again, you can pause the video at this time. The very last vocabulary word we have is radical. Remember that radical is used to denote a square root or an end root, and it just looks like this check mark here. That's what the symbol is. Again, as a reminder, you guys will have to copy it on the teacher do slides in your notes, and in order to access that, you will have to watch the video, which is what I'm recording now. So here are several examples that I pulled directly from the classwork that you guys are completing today. It says write the square or cube of each number. So first example, I have 4 squared, and they already gave me 4 times 4 is equal to 16. So they gave you the first exemplar. Now the next one, they gave me 9 squared. And in this case, I'm going to write 9 times 9. And then this is going to be equal to 81. And then the next example that I have, it says write the square root. So this one I have 36, which is 6 squared. And then the next one we have 64, and this will be 8 to the second power. So in order to find these guys, write the square root, you're actually going to just take the square root of each of these values. So the square root of 36 is 6, and then this one, the square root of 64 is 8. Okay. And then this last example, or the next example I have, write the cube root. So on these, again, you're going to take the cube root. So the cube root of 3, the cube root is 125. It's 5 to the third. And then you're going to take the cube root of 1,000. And if you are not sure what the solution is, guys, you can use Desmond's calculator, and I'll model that right now. Go to desmonds.com. I'm going to click Math Tools, and then I'm going to click Scientific Calculator. And again, I need the cube root, so I'm going to hit this in with the square root here. I'm going to type in the number 3 for my cube, and I'm going to put 1,000 under my radical. And it should give me an answer, and in this case, it's 10. So the solution to this one, the cube root of 1,000, is the same thing as saying 10 to the third power. Okay. And you guys are going to do the same thing on the classwork. Now, these next 2 slides are solving one-step equations, but you're taking the inverse. So this first one, it says find a variable in each quadratic or cube equation. Remember, to undo a cube, I have to take the cube root. So for these example 1 and 2, I'm going to do the cube root of d to the third power is equal to the cube root of negative 125, which again will give me my answer. So I'm going to write the answer here. Let's go back to Desmos. I'm going to hit the blue button to get a new line. I'm going to hit this nth root button. I'm going to type in 3. Then I'm going to type in negative 125 under the radical. And my answer is going to give me a negative 5. So this one I get d is equal to a negative 5. Okay. And again, these just, when I take the cube root of something that's cubed, it just leave me with a variable. The next one, I have a to the third is equal to 2,197. So a to the third, I'm going to take the cube root on both sides here. And so again, over here on the left, it's going to cancel. And then I'm left with, I don't know, let's find out. So 2,197. I'm going to hit the blue button to get a new line. I'm going to hit the nth root. I'm going to type in 3 to indicate that's my cube root. Then let me double check my number, 2,197. So this is 2,197. So my answer on this one is 13. So A is equal to 13. And then again, you guys are going to do the same thing for the rest of those examples on the classwork. You're just going to take the cube root if it's cubed. And I'm going to go ahead and model these next two. These are all squares. So to undo a square, I'm going to take the square root. So in this first one, I have w squared is equal to 121. I'm going to take the square root of w squared on both sides. 121. Remember that these cancel because it's an understood 2 here. That's why I told you guys to make sure that you remember that the index is 2. And so I'm going to get w, in this case, is equal to 11 when I take the square root of 121. This next one, I have t squared is equal to 196. I'm going to take the square root of 196 on both sides. And since I don't know that one on the top of my head, I'm going to go ahead and go to Desmos. Hit the blue button to get a new line. I'm going to take the square, and it's 196. So we need to take the square root of 196, and it's going to give me t is equal to 14. And again, for the rest of the assignment, guys, you're going to do this exact same thing to simplify each of these. So it's just one-step equations, but remember to undo a square, you take the square root, and to undo a cube, you take the cube root. Your classwork is to, let me blow this up. Make sure we're on the same page. So your classwork for today will be to complete the squares, cubes, and radical assignments that I handed out. And then when you are finished, if you finish early, then you need to make sure you work on your delta math. It will be some assignments on rounding as well as squares, cubes, and square roots. Squares, cubes, and roots is what this next one is called. If you are working virtually, then you will actually have to complete the classwork that is on the slides. Make sure that you guys use the draw tab to write directly on the slide. And again, to do that, you have tabs up here at the top. You'll click, it'll naturally be on default on home. You'll click draw, and then you'll just pick the pen and pen color that you want to use, and you'll be able to submit the answers from here. Once you have done that, so once you completed the classwork, and again, if you have extra time, you're working on your Delta Math, then you are 100% finished. Great job. If you have any additional questions, you can ask me questions on, send me a message on Verge. You can send me an email, or you can ask me during class time. Have a great day. Bye.